to a brand new Christmas edition of the Brickyard podcast. We are coming to you on Christmas Eve, pretty much at midnight right now if you're watching on the East Coast, and we have a huge Week 16 recap for you. Someone on the show only missed one game picking this week. Wow, is it feels so hard to be so right all the time, especially into November, into December when playoff time comes around. So we're going to be breaking down every single Week 16 game unredacted. We're also going to be previewing every single Week 17 game, going over the Christmas game, some news about the Kansas City Chiefs. But you flew back to the Live Free or Die state in New Hampshire right now. Now that you are freezing your ass off, does it feel like Christmas?
Actually, it really does. We went to the light show yesterday, and then we just got 6 inches of snow tonight. So
Oh,
it
damn.
definitely it feels so much more holidays here than it does in Phoenix. Phoenix, it's a joke. It feels like it's the summertime right now, especially because it's still fucking 80 there. So it feels good. I actually I'm liking the Christmas cheer. I think when you land, you'll see like, oh, this actually feels like the holidays compared to like Phoenix. I don't know
Yeah,
how
like
I feel.
I feel like the cold's more tolerable. Like once you know, like okay, I don't have to like put up with this, and I can like escape back away from it.
Yeah, I'll see. Yeah, I'm sure when I come home, I'm like, all right, 6 degrees is cute right now. But once when the holidays is over and it's January and February, that's when the winter really begins, I feel like.
Yeah, that's when the snow gets bad, and then especially when it's like snowing late into March, you're like, okay, I get it.
All right.
Let's move on. And I felt like the Seattle Seahawks and the Rams felt like that. They have one of the most ridiculous games on Thursday Night Football, and you could say the number one seed in the NFC came down to probably one of the most bizarre plays we've ever seen, where we have a backwards pass from Sam Darnold, ends up in the end zone, and then Zach Charbonnet just looks around and picks up the ball. And this is why every time in practice, they're like, no matter if it's a dead ball, a live ball, whatever it is, just pick up the ball. Make sure you guys are the ones to pick up the ball after a play where the ball's on the ground. Like, don't let the other team get it. And then Zach Charbonnet with the huge IQ play, just picking up the ball, and everyone was looking around, and suddenly they saw the game was tied. They're like, wait a minute. Was there a safety? What happened? If you blinked, you'd be so confused, and then suddenly the refs are giving the Seattle Seahawks 2 points in. I feel like this is one of the most bizarre plays in a week of at least controversial plays this week. We have an amazing game from Puka Nakua, but what were your thoughts on the safety that maybe it shouldn't have been a safety because it was probably should the play was almost blown dead?
Yeah, the 2 point conversion was not a 2 point conversion. That call was complete bullshit. It should have been the Rams with at that point, a 2 point lead. And then this game goes into overtime. This was a great Thursday night game, maybe the best of this particular season so far. Matt Stafford has a big game. Puka Nacua has for 225 after the controversy with Aiden Ross beginning of the week. He shuts down the noise. He has a huge game. Game goes to overtime. They do the 2 point conversion. They win it. But I think the first 2 point conversion though was complete bullshit. That was not a 2 point conversion. It was an incomplete pass. But it did feel like this game, the refs definitely wanted the Seahawks to win. Maybe it's because they watched the Brickyard. Like, wait a minute, we need to be 16-1 this week. But it just felt like that game, that 2 point conversion, especially. I'm like, okay, they want the Seahawks to win this game. They want to make it interesting in the NFC West.
Yeah, it's almost like the NFL is going for maximum parity this year, where whatever you expect, the opposite is going to happen. So they have that play where maybe one of the most bizarre plays you see all season. Pretty much every single Thursday night game has been an upset so far, outside of like the Patriots playing the Jets and the Baltimore Ravens playing the Dolphins. But there's been just a lot of huge upsets so far on Thursday Night Football. But the Seattle Seahawks and the Rams have played each other twice now, and they played each other pretty evenly throughout it. However, I walked away from this game still feeling like the Rams are the better team, especially if they're able to get Devontae Adams back and then Puka Nakoa having the best game of his career after a controversy that should never have really been a controversy. There's nothing really to speak of there, but he goes for 225 yards and two touchdowns, coming for the crown of potentially best wide receiver in the league. And I know Jackson Smith and Jigba is having a great year, but Puka Nakua just looked like one of the most dominant players in the NFL in that game, and it wasn't even close.
Not at all. And I feel like had he not been injured this season, he would be running away with the offensive player of the year. I mean, he's got 114 catches, which leads this NFL. He's second in receiving yards, even though he missed a game, and then still has 8 touchdowns. Like if he continues on the pace that he has over the next 2 weeks, he could end up in that 130 catch range, which I think the record's 150 from Michael Thomas. So ultimately, he's on path to have 130 receptions and potentially right around 1,800 yards. So I do think that Puka is still in that offensive player of the year conversation, especially with JT taking a step back with Philip Rivers. And then JSN still is in that conversation as well. But I do think that it should be get down to those two guys. And they both balled out. Jackson Smith and Jigba had like 100 yards in this game, but it's those two guys to lose that offensive player of the year at this point. Those guys have been running away with it all season.
Yeah, and I had mentioned the scenario if the Seattle Seahawks had won this game when I picked them to win, which is the San Francisco 49ers and the Seattle Seahawks play each other the last week of the season. And I feel like the NFL has set up a lot of games that are going to be all or nothing for week 18. And that game could potentially be for the number one seed overall in the NFC, I believe, if the San Francisco 49ers were to beat Seattle. So San Francisco kind of quietly treading water, and then Brock Purdy having one of the best games all season versus the Indianapolis Colts, who held the Seattle Seahawks to 6 field goals, no touchdowns last time they played them in Seattle. And then San Francisco goes into a hostile environment where Indianapolis has been good at home all year long, and then Brock Purdy goes on and puts on a show, has one of his best games all year, and then you're starting to see George Kittle, Christian McCaffrey really start to turn it up. And I feel like the San Francisco 49ers are just going to be that sleeper team everyone kind of wrote off, but it's like, okay, like Kyle Shanahan and Sean McVay, they know each other inside out. They've already beat the Rams this year, so it's like, why not San Francisco this year?
Yeah, and they're on a 5 game winning streak, and they're not just winning games, they've blown everybody out. Each game has been by 10 points or more. Really, their last loss was against the Rams when they were really beat up. And ever since then, they blew out the Cardinals, they blew out the Panthers, blew out the Browns, blew out the Titans. And then this Colts game, they put on an absolute wagon of a game. Brock Purdy throws for 5 tutties. So, and it was great to see Philip Rivers on prime time, and I think he put on a hell of a show for a guy that is 44 years old and probably shouldn't be playing in the NFL anymore, but great to see him there. But the Colts, we have predicted the Colts to be dead for a long time, and it is officially into fruition. They fall to 8-7. They're basically out of the playoff one at this point. They're probably not making the playoffs, and they're most likely to be eliminated next week with another loss, especially if the Texans win. So we were right all along about the Colts. They started off 7-1, and here they are at 8-7, as the Brickyard predicted.
Yeah, and I still believe that they would be there with Daniel Jones. I know a lot of people are like, "Oh, well, if Daniel Jones would have been there, it would be different." Like, maybe, like I just can't buy that, especially with how the Jags have been playing the past few weeks, which is one of the teams they've lost to. San Francisco has been blowing everybody out, and honestly, Philip Rivers has looked pretty good, and the offense with him hasn't looked that much different than it did with Daniel Jones. Sure, can Daniel Jones push it down the field a little bit more? I guess, but leadership wise, intangibles, and just overall IQ on the field, like I feel like that ends up being a wash with Philip Rivers.
The only thing I'll say is with Philip Rivers, it's I feel like they're easier to game plan for because it's so obvious that they're trying to run the football as much as possible. But with Philip Rivers, Jonathan Taylor's rushing for 2.7 yards a carry right now because it's very easy to know like okay, they're going to run the football and do short passing situations and a lot of RPOs. So I think they're easier to game plan for. Where at least with Riley Leonard and Daniel Jones, it's less of a you have a little bit more of a threat there. But we all know Philip Rivers is not running, and when he does, he looks like if I was running there, but maybe worse because he's 45 years old. So like they're easier to plan for, but I do think Philip Rivers has looked really good. And personally, for a guy that was in the semifinals for the Hall of Fame this year, and now he's not going until 2030, I do think that this has helped his Hall of Fame case, to be honest. To come back after 5 years, play as good as he has, I mean, put him in the Hall of Fame at this point. I didn't believe it at first, but now that he's had this arc, I'm here for it.
Yeah, honestly, for Philip Rivers, I feel like this will give people a fonder, lasting memory of him, just in general, because Philip Rivers was a guy who was always kind of on the cusp of doing it, but he wasn't able to ever get past the Patriots. Kind of similar to Josh Allen, but with much worse stats. But he was a guy who's like, he would go at it, could never really get it done, had a little bit of a weird arm angle. He would make some big mistakes in big moments sometimes, but now that he comes back, it's kind of this wholesome story. You see him have a little bit of success on the field, even though he's not winning games. I feel like this will kind of reset people's opinion of him.
100%. And he's played well. I mean, 2 games, he's completing 66% of his throws. His QBR is right around the 90s. And for a guy that's coming off of being the coach of a high school team to just be thrown back in and just immediately play the way he has. I think, and also not only that, but the Hall of Fame, he was competing with Drew Brees, he's competing with Tom Brady, he's going to eventually compete with Aaron Rodgers. Like, I think it's going to be better because you can delay him another 5 years, where he's going to be competing with basically whoever retires this year. So I think it's going to be better. It's basically going to be him and Aaron Rodgers in 2030, who ends up having that first ballot consideration.
And then we had the privilege of having Saturday football. That was great. Philadelphia beat up the Commanders. Saquon Barkley got a little bit of his mojo back. Kind of just warming up to go up against the Buffalo Bills, top five worst ranked rush defense in the league, and they beat up the Commanders. And they needed a little bit of a tune-up game, and they've gotten one the past 2 weeks where they beat up on some lesser competition. Does this give you any hope for Philadelphia, or is Philadelphia versus Buffalo the ultimate test on which team is the bigger fraud heading into the playoffs?
I mean, I feel good because their offense has been efficient. And in this game, they actually had Saquon Barkley and AJ Brown going, and Jalen Hurts looked good in this game too. However, it's going to be the Bills game where I'm like, okay, this team is legitimate. They fell, they lost 3 games straight. They were all close. But if they get blown up by the Bills, then I'll still be worried. If they end up beating the Bills or it's at least competitive and they both look good in this game, then I believe in them. I just don't think they have the legs to go on another Super Bowl run. They don't seem like a team that is as driven as a team like the Rams, who maybe has the last year with Matt Stafford, or maybe Sam Darnold wants to make some noise, or better yet, the Niners, who have been really good. I think that there are other teams that are hungrier for the title, whereas the Eagles, they've already won their Super Bowl. They've already made it to two. So I don't think they're going to make the Super Bowl. But it's good that they beat up on the Commanders, a team that they should beat up on.
Yeah, I was glad to see that. So for me, it's kind of we'll see how they finish out the year here, and really all depends on who they match up with in the first round of the playoffs, and we'll go over that in a couple minutes here. And then we actually had a really good game. The Packers unfortunately lost Jordan Love in this game. He goes into concussion protocol and was ruled out. He may be out for next game as well. Thankfully, they're going up against the Vikings without JJ McCarthy. But in overtime, Caleb Williams has a huge throw to DJ Moore and's able to lift the Bears over the Packers and pretty much giving the Bears control of the NFC North at this point. And now the Lions and the Packers both falling apart, and the Bears, I mean, they won the game. They had some mistakes early. Mentally, they were able to rebound, and then Caleb Williams has a massive throw to DJ Moore, who has kind of been a little bit hit or miss for them all season long.
Absolutely. And the best part about this game is the fact that they were down 16-6 at one point with about 3 minutes left. They come storming back. This is a game that I think really set aside the Bears, where maybe you didn't believe in them initially. Maybe you were hesitant about whether Caleb Williams is clutch, but he was clutch in the fourth quarter. made a massive throw to DJ Moore to win the game in overtime. And I think also beating the Packers, getting over your essentially your big brother in the division, and potentially knocking the Packers out of the playoffs if they continue to fall. This is a huge win for the Bears, and it gives me a little bit more hope in them. As you've seen with DeAndre Swift playing very well, you're starting to see their receivers get acclimated, and their defense is making plays as well. So this gave me a lot of hope in the Bears. Do I think they're going to make the Super Bowl? No, but I do think they can win a playoff game depending on who they match up with.
Yeah, and I definitely think they'll be in a lot of close playoff games where maybe they won't necessarily get blown out. However, they are making a lot of mistakes. Like you have the high snap early on this game. So if you're down against some of these teams like the 49ers, Seattle Seahawks, or the Rams, you're not necessarily going to be able to pull out a 10 nothing run with less than 3 minutes left. So definitely a good win for the Bears, but doesn't give me a lot of hope as far as their Super Bowl run, as you said.
Yeah. And then the speaking of the AFC North, the Lions, dude. That game broke my heart. As a man who has rooted for the Lions these last several years with Dan Campbell, that last call, which is a kind of the highlight of this game, both games it came down to the wire, but that last play where Amon-Ra pitches it to Jared Goff, he runs it into the end zone, and it ends on a offensive pass interference, which was such a bullshit call, just a heartbreaking way. Both of these teams needed to win this game, but I felt like the Lions needed to win it even more with how that division has looked at for them in that NFC playoff picture. The Steelers winning, congrats. Yet another non-losing season for Mike Tomlin. Yippee. But I still don't fully believe in the Steelers and the Lions. I just feel like this might be the nail in the coffin for their season, sadly.
Yeah, this was definitely a depressing game, especially for the Detroit Lions, especially to go out like that. And this has been multiple times now where the refs have gotten in the way and just made some pretty bad calls this season at the end of games. And then, especially for the Detroit Lions, where it seems like they're always getting screwed by the refs. And I get, sure, is it offensive pass interference, but there's no real impact if the Steelers lose this game. Doesn't look like the Ravens are really going to come back and win the division either. So just a tough blow. Dan Campbell even saying himself, he told his guys that this is probably it. And if we lose this game, we don't control our own destiny going forward. So I'm pretty sure the Packers would have to lose out, and then the Lions would have to win out for them to even have a shot at making the playoffs at this point.
And it's sad. The Lions do face the Vikings, and JJ McCarthy won't be playing. Then they end the season on the Bears, who are still going to be fighting for the one seed potentially. Unfortunately for the Lions, it's probably their last. They're not going to make the playoffs at this point, which is kind of devastating because I do think this team is still a good team. But between injuries, between some bad plays, between some bad luck here, unfortunately, this is probably the nail in the coffin for their season. So that's unfortunate to see that. But if we stay in the
What about
AFC
DK
North,
Metcalf too?
oh
Getting
yes, that's
suspended the rest of the season, and taking a swipe out of Ben. That was really the highlight of this game for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Is you have that all tight end offense firing on all cylinders, and then DK Metcalf taking a swipe out of Fan, taking the bait in this one. I mean, you want to talk about DK Metcalf isms? It's like he pretty much lost out on 45, or he lost out on a $500,000 incentive because of this getting suspended, and then he has $45 million that can now be voidable on his contract.
yeah, and it's kind of unsure what the fan was saying, but the reports are showing that he was calling him by his government name. He was calling him DeKalin Metcalf, which apparently, if you want to piss DK Metcalf off, you just call him by his government name, and that's enough to irk him. But apparently, the same fan last year was chirping at him and it was getting under DK Metcalf's skin. For me, if I'm a Steelers fan, how pissed am I at DK Metcalf? You just basically clinched your division with the Ravens falling to the Patriots, and DK has been pretty inconsistent for you. But the fact that he goes out there and punches a fan is like, can the Steelers have a normal player ever? Can they ever have a normal wide receiver? I mean, between Juju and Antonio Brown and Chase Claypool and George Pickens, and now the trend continues with DK Metcalf punching a fan because they called him by his government name. Can they just catch a break? Can they have a wide receiver that's like level-headed, like a Jackson Smith and Jigba? Is that possible for the Steelers, or is it just can they only have psychotic receivers?
I don't know. It's like something literally in the wide receiver room in the Steelers where they all go insane. They all go crazy. The ghost of Antonio Brown's past comes back to haunt the Pittsburgh Steelers. And, DK Metcalf, he comes from Seattle and he had like, I can't remember him having like a blow up this bad in Seattle before. Like where he like
No.
went after a fan, and it's like the NFL. Like it should be pretty easy to just walk away. Like you just walked away from $500,000 and now they can sue you. Like you just did them the biggest favor in the world.
And he was a Lions fan. I'm like, this is exactly what he wanted you to do. He wanted you to throw a jab at him, and he didn't even land his punch either. So it's like, what would like? There's nothing he could have said that should have gotten under your skin because you're an NFL wide receiver at the end of the day, and you're making hundreds of millions of dollars. I just don't know what he could have possibly said that would have gotten you so pissed to throw a punch at a fan at this point.
Yeah.
But he's suspended now, 2 games, and he might lose out on $40 million. Hope it was worth it, dude.
Yeah, I hope it was worth it. And then the Tampa Bay Buccaneers fans are probably as upset right now as DK Metcalf. And we did the math on this one where you're like, the Panthers have pretty much gone win, loss, win, loss, win, loss. And then I was like, wait a minute. They play the Buccaneers and they just lost their last game. So what's going to happen when they play the Buccaneers? They're going to win, probably going to lose their next game to Seattle. And then they play the Buccaneers again. That pretty much wraps up their division here. And then Tampa Bay has not looked very good either. So, Bryce Young comes up clutch. The Panthers, say what they will about them. They look like an energetic team that just wants it a little bit more, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers just seem tired. They seem a little bit injured, and Baker Mayfield has not played well over the past few weeks, and he's probably dealing with some injuries. I know he's taken some big shots, but if you are injured and you're playing, you're still putting yourself out there for criticism, so you do own some of the responsibility for your team falling off.
Oh, 100%. And it's sad because I remember early in the season we were talking about Baker in the MVP conversation. Could the Bucks get the 1 seed potentially? They looked like they were going to run away with that division. Now they've lost 6 of the last 7 games. Baker's banged up. We've had Mbuku go down. We've had Mike Evans lose his 1,000-yard receiving streak. Chris Godwin's been hurt. Bucky Irving's been hurt. It just feels like this entire team has fallen apart, and they're just kind of treading to the finish line at this point. At this point, I'd rather see the Panthers win that division. So at least the playoff game is going to look a little more competitive because this Bucks team just looks dead, unfortunately, and it's devastating because I love this Bucks team, but Panthers just seem more energized and they feel like they could put up a better fight these days against whoever they face, compared to what we would see with the Bucks.
Yeah, it's like Emeka Ibuka has not been the same ever since he's come back from injury. So I don't know if that's just a lingering thing that's still bothering him, but he's just dropping some passes that he was catching earlier on in the season. And then Chris Godwin's been okay, but you had kind of this rotating cast of running backs where you haven't really been able to build any consistency, and the injuries have just been catching up with you. So Panthers get it done as predicted in this one. And then the Buffalo Bills and Browns game was close as well as we predicted. We didn't say that the Buffalo Bills were going to lose necessarily, but we're like, in Cleveland, Miles Garrett desperately trying to get that sack record, even though he didn't break it on Sunday. And then Josh Allen. Did you know if Josh Allen tells the ref, hey, I'm going to fall down in the end zone, but don't call it a safety because I was giving myself up earlier? Speaking of things that were safeties that shouldn't have been, and then you have a safety that should have been. Josh Allen's like, oh, well, the quarterback was giving himself up going down in the end zone. I'm like, really? Like,
That's
that
a
was
safety.
clearly a safety, right?
That was absolutely a safety. You can't give yourself up in the end zone. That's like doing a check down in the end zone. Like, what do you expect is going to happen? You're in the end zone, you get sacked. That's the end of it. You should have been called for a safety, but we called it with this Bills and Browns game. I knew that this game was going to be close. If there's any team that the Browns could run on, it was going to be the Bills in this game. Unfortunately, Quinton Jenkins has a nasty injury in this game. He goes down, but Shador plays pretty decent. His stat line doesn't look great, but there was 2 picks in that game. that didn't go his way. There's some tip balls in that game and some passes that bounced off the receiver, but I feel like he played fairly well for Shador Sanders. But this was an obvious game for me. I knew that this 10.5 point spread was not attainable for the Bills. So if you followed our bets, I hope you liked our booth cash out there. But I just had a feeling the Bills tend to play pretty close in games that they should blow teams out. And this is a prime example of that.
Yeah, I just don't know what's going on with the refing in the Buffalo Bills. It really seems like the refs and the NFL are trying to help the Bills win the AFC East because there's been some calls that the Bills are getting. You're just like, what? And there's been some calls that the Patriots haven't been getting, like that blatant pass interference call in the Baltimore Ravens game on Kayshon Boutte, where he gets tackled before he even gets the ball. I'm like, what is going on? Is the NFL trying to force the Buffalo Bills to win the AFC East? Like you're struggling against the Cleveland Browns. It's a 23 to 20 struggle session. Josh Allen gets touchdown in the end zone for a sack and then the refs are like, "Oh no. He gave himself up before he was in the end zone." Like, are you kidding me? We're going through so many mental gymnastics to help the Buffalo Bills at this point. Like, just let them lose. Like, I feel like the Browns actually should have got them in this one.
The Browns were close. I mean, you get that safety, maybe you get the ball last in the fourth quarter, maybe you can push the ball down the field and win the game. But I agree. It definitely feels like, especially the fact that there's no Mahomes, there's probably not going to be a Lamar, and there's definitely not going to be a Joe Burrow in the AFC playoff picture. I feel like they're pushing for the Bills to win that division and ultimately make their way to the Super Bowl. Like this is the year that they do it. Maybe this is what the scriptwriters had all along, but it's better for them if they beat the end up winning that division. Unfortunately, the Patriots just keep winning football games that maybe the refs don't want them to win. But this Bills game, not a lot of faith for the Bills going into the playoffs for me. I don't believe in them, nor do you. You struggle against the Browns. I just don't know how you're going to face when you have to face the Broncos, the Texans, the Patriots, hell, even the Chargers potentially could give some noise to the Bills.
Yeah, and the Chargers had a really good game versus Dallas on Sunday. Go out there, win 34 to 17. Justin Herbert looked really good in this one. Doesn't mean too much for the Cowboys, but it at least gave me some hope for the Chargers. Congratulations, Justin Herbert and Josh Allen, since we were just talking about you for being selected to the Pro Bowl. But overall, just nice to see a solid game. Lad McConkey looks like he's leveled up a little bit this year, where a little bit more effortless, I would say, for him. So him and Justin Herbert have a good connection. And then some of their other rookie wide receivers coming alive in this one as well. So this gave me a little bit of hope for the Chargers if they're going to be in the playoffs. I still don't want to see them play the Steelers in the first round, but what can you do?
Right now, if the playoffs ended today, it would be them and the Steelers. They have officially clinched the place in the dance, but the Chargers, I mean, they're starting to get healthy a little bit. They don't have their offensive line by any means. Their offensive line is still very rough, but no sacks for Justin Herbert in this game, so that's good to see. You had Amarian Hampton who had a big game in this game. Herbert was running with his legs here. Big game there, but I still think the Chargers could win a playoff game depending on who they match up with. But I still think with how bad that offensive line is, there's no way you make it all the way to the Super Bowl with what we have there.
Yeah, and the problem with the Chargers is they play Houston next week. And so, say they theoretically lose to Houston, you're probably. Do you think they rest their starters, or do you think you just want to keep pace? If Buffalo is ahead of you, because you just settle into the sixth seed there and just like, all right, we're gonna accept our fate and play Jacksonville, because last year before they played Houston, they ended up resting their starters once they were kind of locked into that fifth seed already.
Well, I remember a few years ago, and I'm sure you remember too, when Brandon Staley didn't rest starters, and then Mike Williams went down, and that devastated them in that Jags game. For a franchise as cursed as the Chargers, don't risk it. Just have the sixth seed. You go and face the Jags, or maybe you face the Steelers still in this game, but I wouldn't risk it when you're a perpetually cursed franchise, unless if maybe you're in that conversation for the bye week. But I don't think you really are at this point. So I would rest starters if I'm the Chargers. You've already clinched the spot. Go ahead and face the Steelers. Go ahead and face the Jags, whoever you end up facing. But I wouldn't risk it if you're the Chargers.
Yeah, I wouldn't risk it either. Team that's kind of risking it right now, even though they're out of the playoffs. The Bengals, Quinn Ewers came and he threw two interceptions. Joe Burrow came. He threw four touchdowns, and Joe Burrow had fun. He said, "This is what football is supposed to be like." So, Cincinnati Bengals take care of business versus the Miami Dolphins. This game means nothing, but it was just nice to see poetry in motion, which is Joe Burrow, T. Higgins, and Jamar Chase, and it just makes you want the NFL to take the Steelers out of the playoffs and put the Bengals there instead.
Yeah, this was great. I wish that this would have been the Bengals all season long, because if Burrow was healthy and everyone was on full cylinder and the Bengals defense was functioning properly, this is how every Bengals team should be at this point. Joe Burrow throwing four tutties, 300 yards, beating up on a bad team like the Dolphins. Quinn Ewers looked like what we expected Quinn Ewers to look like, but I wish this was more of the Bengals all season long, instead of them losing to the Jets and the Bears and all these other teams that they shouldn't have lost to in last minute games. But what can you do? Hopefully next season they figure it out. But this team, it's just sad because they had so much potential to be a good team this year.
Yeah, so we'll see what they do next year. And then another quick hitter here. We called this one Saints and Jets. Saints on a roll right now, 3 wins in a row. Tyler Shuck, is it? I know the commentators say Shuck. I know you say Shaw. Like name is
I
a
think
little
it's
bit
Shook.
confusing. I think it's Shuck, but he has another good game. They win 29 to 6 over the New York Jets, and then the Jets had a glimmer of hope for they were playing well, and now they're back down the dumps in New Orleans, building some more momentum heading into next season. I like what I'm seeing.
Yeah, and we've talked about this a little bit. We talked about it last week, but they've won four of the last six games. They had a close game against Miami that they nearly pulled out, but they beat their division foes in back-to-back weeks. Then they beat the Jets, and they're building good momentum. This is exactly for a team that is in rebuild. This is exactly what you want to see. You start out, you struggle a little bit. They start to get acclimated. They've swept the Panthers. They have a chance to sweep to get revenge against the Falcons in Week 18. I think this team can win another game or two before the season's over and finish with a comparable 6-7 record. So I like what I saw, and I feel like they do have their quarterback of the future. It's, can they get a receiver around him? Can they get a good offensive line around him? And can they move on from some of their older defensive players and fill in and get some nice edge rushers? But I really like what I've seen from them. And they got to Brady Cook a lot in this game, but I like what I've seen from the Saints a lot. And I do think this is a team that could easily win the division next year.
Yeah, so we'll see with the Saints. Definitely some hope for the future there. Kellen Moore starting to turn it around. And then a team competing for the number one overall pick next week. The New York Giants conveniently play a super close game and then lose at the last second to stay in contention for the number one overall pick. Vikings get it done 16 to 13. Giants, they might have the number one overall pick. I feel like the Raiders might beat them next week, but overall, it was a game that happened, and Nine made some incredible plays and some awful plays, and so did Jackson Dart. He went pretty much a whole half without a completion, and his first completion was a pick. So there's
Yep.
that.
Yeah, Jackson Dart had a hideous game. If you're bad enough to have him in fantasy, got .02 fantasy points for those who are in the playoff picture in the fantasy playoffs. JJ McCarthy gets hurt in this game, and now we're gonna have Max Brosmer, who I believe came from UNH. So interestingly enough, but yeah, the Giants. If I'm the Giants, I would just lose out, try to get that number one overall pick. You could potentially trade that, or maybe you like one of the quarterback prospects more than Jackson Dart, who's been injured every single game, basically. Or maybe you go and trade back and get some picks, but convenient. This is exactly what I would want right now for the Giants. Play competitive, but not win. And then the Vikings, JJ McCarthy's hurt again. Your season's all but over, but you're still playing hard, and that's what we like to see.
Yeah, I know Cowherd floated around potentially trading Jackson Dart if you get the number one pick and then taking the quarterback from Indiana.
Yeah, Mendoza. I mean,
Yeah.
the Mendoza, he's definitely got more composure. He's probably a better quarterback prospect, and I do think there's somebody interested in Jackson Dart. With the way he plays, I just don't think that he's going to have a sustainable career in the NFL if he doesn't adapt. I like his aura. I think he's a good quarterback. I think he could be a franchise guy, but you have a chance to draft a guy who's a better prospect first overall and lead your team to the future. So I would definitely investigate that, depending, especially if you get that first overall pick, because I do think you'll be positioned better with Mendoza than if you were with Jackson Dart.
Cam Ward had a 122 overall passer rating versus the Kansas City Chiefs. Gardner Minshew came. He got injured right away in this game. He tears his ACL. And now the Kansas City Chiefs are just falling in the draft, which is probably the best thing for them. But Titans get the win. But the big news this week is that in 2031, the Kansas City Chiefs are going to be moving to Kansas and they're building a dome, so no more negative 20-degree games, no more fans going to the hospital for hypothermia after the game anymore for the Kansas City Chiefs, which you like to see it, but you're also giving up a huge home field advantage, which I feel like powered their defense a lot because when you get to play in that brutal cold, that's going to elevate a defense as good as the Kansas City Chiefs.
100%. I hate that they're honestly building a new stadium. I don't care so much. I mean, they're really close to Kansas anyways, and they're gonna like. It's not so much that they're relocating; it's the fact that they're getting rid of Arrowhead, which is like an iconic NFL stadium. This would be like if Green Bay built a new stadium outside of Lambeau. Like it's the same kind of iconic stadium, maybe not to the same degree as Lambeau, but still in the sense like this is a stadium that they've had for 50 years. We're not going to have any more of those classic snow games that we've had for Chief Stadium. And I also feel like Arrowhead is it's just so iconic to see that it's leaving in the next 5 years. I don't love it. And I don't love it for, the people in Missouri who go to these Chiefs games, who love their Chiefs team, who've been able to see the Chiefs be their dynasty. It just I wish that they would have ultimately rather than getting a new stadium, just renovate Arrowhead. Because I do think they are one of the few NFL stadiums that is better to just renovate and keep and preserve rather than going and getting a new stadium. So I don't really love this move, honestly.
Yeah, I don't love it either. I get why the players would like it because they're not playing in like 1 degree games with negative wind chills. But it's just like the Bills are gonna have a new stadium next year. That's gonna be a dome. I think they're building. So it's like
Hmm.
it's just gonna be Heinz Field. I know it's Acrisure, but it's Heinz Field. Everyone knows it. And then it's going to be Gillette Stadium. It's going to be Green Bay. And then outside of that, I feel like Cincinnati is probably going to be the only franchise inevitably that won't have a dome. If I had to bet on one team that's going to be too cheap to build a dome, it's probably going to be the Cincinnati Bengals. And then eventually, I feel like people will give them credit for that because I feel like if football is just all in a dome, it takes a, it takes away a little bit from the specialness that you get from that late November, December, and January football. And it's not like the cold that ends up injuring people. I feel like it's the turf, not
Yeah,
it not being grass.
I would agree. And I also think like the snow games, like football is stacked between the fall and the winter time. And part of the things that gets you excited for the holidays, it's a December game. Maybe it's Patriots Buffalo, maybe it's Ravens Steelers, but it's one of those games that there's snow on the ground, it's 15 degrees, it's more reliant on the run game. We have some of the most iconic NFL games of all time that are in snowy weather games. And the fact that we're moving, yeah, LaShawn McCoy, prime example, that we're moving away from that. And I understand why they're doing it, but I just wish they wouldn't because that's part of what I think makes the NFL world magic. Unlike with baseball, where if there's any bit of rain, it's delayed. And obviously, NBA games are all played um, in an arena. Like this is the one sport that it doesn't really matter what the weather is. You're still going to play through it. And that's kind of the beauty of football with how much of a toll that you take on your body. I would rather it be an outdoor sport at this point.
Yeah. So definitely feels like the NFL is trending that way. And if it's eventually every single team has a dome, feel like it'll be like back in my day. I remember when football was played outside. It's like I feel like I'm already getting old. Like what? Someone's gonna grow up and be like, you never saw a snow game before. Like you're gonna have some 12-year-old 30 years in the future when Cincinnati announces they're building a dome. Like, what's a snow game?
Snow games are the best. That's like the best football game you can ask for. And we're missing out on it because of domes. And we're also going to miss all the. Remember that game a few years ago where it was like Niners and I believe the Steelers with Trey Lance, and the game was like a monsoon. Like we're not going to have a monsoon game anymore. We're not going to have a snow game anymore. Like we're just not going to have these classic NFL games that are weather based because of it. And I think it's honestly a tragedy.
Yeah, even the Bills game, the Bills had a blizzard game this year. I forget who it was against, but
I think it might have been the Patriots. I think was it the first Patriots game?
no,
Or
that one
maybe it
was
was
just a cold Sunday night football game. But they had like a really competitive snow game in Buffalo this year already.
yeah, and we missed out on it. And we're not going to have any future ones because of it, which I think is just devastating.
One team that will probably never ever have a rain game or a snow game or ever have to worry about that would be the Arizona Cardinals. And the Arizona Cardinals stay the worst franchise in the NFL. I picked the Falcons in this one. Kirk Cousins playing for his job, and Jacoby Brissett out there stat padding, playing really good football. But again, the Arizona Cardinals can't crack 20 points.
Nope, can't crack 20 points. Jacoby Brissett has 203 yards in this game. And the Cardinals, a stat that I read this week that I think is fun to share. Carson Palmer is the only quarterback in Cardinals history with a winning record. You want to talk about a franchise that is literally the definition of poverty. We make fun of the Browns on this show. We make fun of the Jets on this show. The Cardinals in 105 years have made the playoffs 9 times. They have averaged a playoff appearance every 10 years at this point. So this franchise is cursed. They're terrible. And if you listen to local Cardinals radio, you're going to hear them voting for, pushing for, building around Jacoby Brissett, a guy who is now 32 years old, who is 33 years old. My bad, he just turned 33. Building around this guy, moving on from Kyler, and building your future around a 33-year-old quarterback who is obviously a backup quarterback. It's just a sign of a poverty franchise and honestly a poverty fan base.
Yeah, I mean, I guess he's a little bit more entertaining to watch than Geno Smith, but the fact that they're talking about building around Jacoby Brissett, like, no, he's still a backup quarterback. This is like when teams would talk about building around Ryan Fitzpatrick back in the day. Like, sure, he's good at times, but not for an entire season.
And then they're not winning games with him. Like, why would you build around a guy that you haven't? You've won one game with Jacoby Brissett, and it was against the Cowboys. Otherwise, you've lost every game with him. Like, why are you
And that's
building
like
around
a
the guy?
historic curse, too. That's not even like him doing that. That's just the NFL, like, magic.
Yeah, it's just a team that they happen to beat up on all the time. But like, you've won one game with him in the 7 games that he started, and that's the guy you're like, oh well, he's 1-6 with us. We should build around him. That's the epitome of a franchise that perpetually is a loser. Cardinals are a losing franchise, and they're a loser fan base. Don't build around Jacoby Brissett.
And then last kind of throwaway game here. Houston beats Las Vegas. Ashton Denty actually has a pretty good game for the Raiders, but Nico Collins ends up sealing the victory here for Houston on a big throw from CJ Stroud. And the Texans is a little bit of a tough one. Vegas kind of got the jump on them early, but overall they're able to pull it out, and they're that much closer to clinching a playoff spot right now.
Yeah, right now they sit at the 7 seed, but they are 2 wins ahead of the Colts. So I believe a win next week, and they're in. So, and they're also still competing for the division with the Jags, which that's the game that we'll go over next. But it wasn't pretty. It was definitely not the sexiest of wins for the Texans, but a win is a win. We've seen their running game start to get back going a little bit. Nico Collins has a big game in this game. But shout out the Raiders for playing hard. They are fighting for that number one overall pick, but ultimately, I think this Texans defense still show that they are here to be fighting for that AFC. So we love to see it. So it wasn't pretty, but I like this win for the Texans.
Yeah, what was a great win was Jacksonville coming out there and absolutely putting their neck on the Denver Broncos. This game was a little bit competitive early on, but Jacksonville was able to pull away here. You have a huge game from Washington, and then Trevor is really starting to cook at this point, and he's making a late season MVP push. If you look at his numbers over the past 8 games now, the Jacksonville Jaguars have been on a hot streak, scoring 25 plus points in 8 straight games, and now Jacksonville goes into Denver. I had the Jags with the upset, so if you're following our picks, following our bets, you definitely made some money there. But Jacksonville going to Denver, and then Denver, even though they were kind of out of the game, they're still trying to push for it, and then they just absolutely lay out Bryant, literally have him hauled out on a stretcher. So it kind of shows you the intensity and where the Jacksonville Jaguars' mind are at, where it's like, okay, if you're still going to come out here, you're still trying to get the edge over us and still trying to compete for a win, we're going to lay you out here. We're going to still hit you hard, and we're going to finish the game, which is exactly what you should do. And it's unfortunate that he went down, but the Jaguars are showing a lot of intensity, and this is not the same team we saw the first half of it. And then ever since Jacoby Myers joined this team, he's just been the magic piece that has kind of brought the team together, added a lot of depth to their offense, and just a lot of chemistry. Where he's a added blocker in the run game now. He's just a trusted target for Trevor Lawrence, and now Trevor has some other players that are just starting to break out. Strange, who's dealing with some injuries early on in the season. BTJ, who had struggled early on as well, he's starting to come alive a little bit and make some plays here. Now, this is quietly the most dangerous team heading into the playoffs in the AFC.
I think this was the biggest win I've ever seen from the Jaguars, to be honest. This is a game that I didn't really believe in the Jags entering this game. I had a lot of question marks, but now Trevor has 12 touchdowns to zero interceptions over the last 5 games. They've won 6 consecutive games now at this point, potentially clinching the division next week. But Trevor Lawrence, 23 of 26, 3 touchdowns, 279. He's starting to get going. He's starting to use his legs more in this game as well. This is finally the prince that's been promised for us for the Jaguars. Their defense held up against the Broncos. They did great, and especially against the Broncos defense, which has been one of the best in the league. So if you want to talk about the most impressive win where I can finally begin to wrap my arms around the Jaguars, this is a game where I'm like, wait a minute, this team might actually make some noise in the AFC. And I really like what I've seen. Parker Washington's done great for them. Jacoby Myers, what an addition he's been. 6th round pick. I think they've won that trade. So this is probably the biggest win in Jags history for me.
Yeah, and the fact that Parker Washington, he's breaking the game wide open for them, where he's another big play guy, which is kind of what they've been missing at the wide receiver position. And then Travis Etienne's quietly having one of his best seasons, where now Trevor can flip it to Parker Washington, get a big play that takes some pressure off of him. He can just do a quick screen out to Travis Etienne, pick up a third and short, and then he can turn it into a 15-yard completion. He has Brenton Strange now at tight end. He has Jacoby Myers, who he can rely on, and he just some of the throws he's making are absolutely ridiculous. He's showing you that he's probably one of the best pure passers in the league from the pocket right now. He's making the case to be a top 5 quarterback, and everyone wants to talk about this is Josh Allen's year to do it in the AFC, but like, no, this is actually Trevor Lawrence's year to do it. And then he went out there and absolutely exposed the Denver Broncos, where the Denver Broncos have kind of been just playing very close to their competition. They're playing up to their competition, playing down to their competition. The Jaguars like, no, we're coming into Denver, and you're not coming back in this game. Especially the fact that they did this in the Mile High Stadium in a hostile environment, and then the Broncos were the one running out of steam. Like, the Broncos are kind of showing some signs that aren't very good for a team that was really dynamic early on the season. Bo Nix just had his best game of the season last week, and then you start getting punched in the mouth at the end of the season. That's not good, especially when you play the Chargers at the end of it. And if the Chargers figure out a way how to beat the Texans and then you're able to outscore them, you might be a wild card team. And if you are a wild card team, you might be playing the Jaguars in the first round.
And they just punched him in the mouth. And they do face the Chiefs next week, which I think they should win. But otherwise, you have this Chargers game that could ultimately decide their fate for them. But yeah, the Broncos, I'm not overly impressed with their offense. I think that's been a question mark for just about everybody all season long. They muster up 20 points despite Bo Nix throwing for 350 in this game. The receiver core is average at best, with Cortland Sutton kind of being the main receiver there. And if their defense doesn't hold a team below 20 points, then I'm not confident that they're going to win that game. And they've had a lot of games that they've won this year that were not pretty. They had that Jets game that was hideous. They had that Raiders game, which was maybe the worst game in all of this season. So there's a lot of question marks. They've had a lot of close games. They probably should have lost to the Giants. I do think that their record is a little bit inflated. I believe we had them at 12-5, which I do think is attainable still if they fall these next 2 weeks, but I just don't know if I fully can embrace them, especially if they were to win that one seed, depending on who they match up with. I think we could be seeing a first round exit.
Yeah, and really the only team that they beat convincingly was Dallas
Yeah.
earlier on in the season. Like Bo Nix, I get you had a great game last week. Like that's fine, but like the Jaguars are here. They're showing they're one of the top contenders in the league. Trevor putting on a late season performance, and then they're getting hot at the exact right time where the Buffalo Bills struggling against the Browns. Patriots look like they're dealing with injuries, so now you're looking up at the Jaguars like, oh, okay, why not the Jags in
Yeah.
the AFC?
Yeah, why not? Speaking of we mentioned the Patriots. They do get their win against the Ravens, but like with the NFL media, they're putting an asterisk next to everything the Patriots have done lately. Lamar goes down, Tyler Huntley steps in. Patriots come back down 10 points again, which is now the 17th blown second half 10-point lead that John Harbaugh has blown in his time with the Ravens, which is the most in NFL history now at this point. But at this point, Drake May, he has a great game. He finally eclipses 300 yards, so that can finally be something that they can remove from the lack of his resume. They come back down. They were down 24-14, if I'm not mistaken. They come and crawl back. Stephon Diggs has a massive game in this game. Matt Collins makes some big plays. And unfortunately, we see Travion Henderson go down with injury. They have some offensive line injuries as well. And I do think we're starting to see some cracks in the Patriots' armor, but they're 7-0 away from home right now, and they are still proving to be a tough, gritty team. Did this game give you any hope or any validation with them beating the Ravens, or is this more or less the Ravens falling apart and the Patriots getting the right breaks?
Yeah, it doesn't really change my opinion on the Patriots here because it seems like the NFL is trying to push the Bills to the top of the AFC East, where the Patriots have a obvious pass interference call against Kayshawn Booty, and the very and like last week when the Patriots played the Buffalo Bills, the call that ends up deciding the game is a ticky tack pass interference call that gives the Bills a huge third down where if the Bills don't convert that, the Patriots probably win this game. So I feel like there's been a lot of just weird calls that have been head scratching for the New England Patriots in this game. Honestly, like they've just been a little bit banged up here, so I think if any team in the AFC needs that one seed, it'd be the Patriots. You have Robert Spillane go down; he wasn't a part of this game. You have Will Campbell, who is your star offensive lineman ever since he's gone down. Drake May's been under a lot of pressure. The thing is, though, even when Drake May is under pressure, he's delivering the ball accurately. I still think he has another gear to go to because he's reserving his legs a little bit for the playoffs where I don't think he's gonna try and injure himself during the regular season, and then just some plays from Hunter Henry, some plays from Kayshawn Booty. You're leaving those on the field, which can't happen. So in the playoffs, if you want to make a run, it's going to be Henry and Kayshawn Booty. Are they going to step up? But really liked what I saw in this game from Kyle Williams. It seems like he only gets one or two catches a game, but it's usually the biggest play of the game, and it was an incredible touchdown pass that ended up helping the Patriots eventually win this game in combination with, Travion Henderson goes out short, but then Ramondre Stevenson suddenly looks like the best Ramondre Stevenson we've seen all year long. So that next man up mentality has been there for the Patriots all season. So this game is kind of more of the same from the Patriots. This is what I expected from them. The weird thing, though, was Derrick Henry kind of getting sidelined in this game where he was on pace for almost 200 yards rushing. I believe he has let me pull it up here.
I think he had 130.
200. He had 130. He had just gotten a second touchdown. He was averaging 7 yards a carry. And then ever since the third quarter, John Harbaugh kind of sidelined him, which I thought was weird.
Oh, 100%. And they give it to Keaton Mitchell, who then rushes for 1.4 yards a carry. They give him 10 carries in this game. And it feels like it kind of killed the Ravens' momentum quite a bit. Then you see some fumbles that occur that go their way. We have a Zay Flowers awful fumble, which seems to be the story of Zay Flowers in key moments as of late. But very questionable. Derrick Henry, like you mentioned, 7 yards a carry. He was running all over the Patriots. They didn't have an answer for him. He was even getting involved in the passing game a little bit as well. But this was very questionable. And this is another reason why if we had done the worst top five this week, you would see the Ravens on here. The fact that you continuously blow 10-point leads with John Harbaugh, you consistently see these weird calls like sidelining Derrick Henry in this game. Now, Lamar Jackson, who's clearly not 100%, getting banged up again in this game. I just don't know if the future of the Ravens should be with John Harbaugh, a special teams guy who's been there for almost 20 years now. You guys have won one Super Bowl despite the fact that you have one of the best quarterbacks of all time at the position right now, and you guys have mustered just three playoff wins. So, I mean, I think this is a game where you blow another 10-point lead, you're right in the mix for the division. This loss, you're pretty much out of it at this point. Maybe now we consider firing John Harbaugh.
Yeah, firing John Harbaugh and then Lamar has been kind of getting consistently hurt off and on, where it seems like he'll have a really good season, get banged up for a season, have a really good season, get banged up, and then it just puts the Steelers in a position where they just win the division every year by default, whether it's Mason Rudolph, whether it's Kenny Pickett, whether it's Aaron Rodgers this year. They kind of just end up walking their way to the division because for some reason John Harbaugh can't get the ball to Derrick Henry. So overall, kind of more of the same from the Patriots, but I do think this kind of I don't know. Like for them going into the playoffs, if they're not healthy, I think they could easily be a one and done team. And I've never been someone that has said the Patriots are going to get to the Super Bowl this year. I just thought they were at least going to be 13-4, potentially the number one seed. Um, just based off of their schedule. But this is still a team playing with house money. Like we had them going 10-7, which I feel like was way more generous than any other person who had picked the Patriots this year. And then we also had them in the wild card bubble as well, which no one else had them there either. So I still feel like vindicated by this team's season.
Oh, 100%. I mean, they still could potentially get the one seed. I honestly, with the way they've played away from home, I honestly think they may benefit from having the two seed. But right now, with how it looks, with you have your injuries to Will Campbell, we have Travion Henderson, who's been such a force for you the last few weeks. He goes down. I think that that's going to be a big loss. If the Patriots are first round exits, First Take is probably going to make a field day with them, but I don't think you should. If they end up being 13-4, the fact that they were 4-13 last year and they've struggled the last few years, the fact that they're so ahead of schedule and they have all this money to play with, a playoff win would be nice, but they're clearly not going to win the Super Bowl, I don't think. But a playoff win would be fine. If they are a one and done team, they still have had a super successful season. Absolutely exceeded expectations.
Yeah, and we'll see. Like if they're the two seed, they match up with Houston. Houston doesn't necessarily have the most potent run game to expose the Patriots' flaws, so you could probably squeak by a win versus them or the Patriots here. But if you match up with the Bills or the Jaguars, I don't love it, and I think those should be the teams that should make it out of the AFC.
Yeah, I would agree. But that was week 16. Before we go into week 17, I do have the playoff picture in front of us. If it ended today, not a lot
Let's
has
go.
changed from week to week, but there are more clinching scenarios here. The Broncos, Patriots, Jags, Chargers, and Bills all clinched. And then the Steelers can clinch next week, and so can the Texans. Colts fall, and so do the Ravens. So they're now 2 games out from that seventh seed. But as of now, the Broncos still have that one seed for now. We have the Patriots as the 2 seed who would set up against the Texans. And then the Jags would face the Bills, and then Steelers, Chargers for that 4 and 5 game.
Whew. And then, so pretty much the most important game left for the AFC playoff picture is going to be Houston and the Chargers because that's pretty much going to determine. Houston would be able to jump the Chargers, I believe,
Mm.
because they have beaten the Buffalo Bills and they've beaten the Chargers. So the Bills would end up sliding into that 5 spot versus the Steelers because they have a better record. and they really don't play anyone tough. But they do play Philadelphia next week, so I feel like the two most important games for the AFC playoff picture will be Buffalo versus Philly, and then Houston versus the Chargers. And I honestly think that the Chargers might beat Houston, and then Houston's going to stay at the 7th seed. Chargers stay in the 5th seed and end up playing the Steelers in the first round. And I actually think that could be a pretty competitive game there, especially if DK Metcalf comes back fresh, pissed off, in the right mentality. And then you have all of the tight ends for the Steelers. It would just be, can Pittsburgh convert in the red zone against them, which I don't know. And then you have two people in the first round who perpetually have been playoff chokers over the past few years with Aaron Rodgers and Justin Herbert. So that would kind of be like who's going to try and lose the game more.
Yeah, and I do think if the Chargers are healthy, I think they beat the Steelers. But that's a game that I wouldn't bet on. I don't. I have no idea how that's going to go. Aaron Rodgers has more clutch postseason performances, so maybe I give the edge to Aaron Rodgers. But I honestly don't think either of those teams are going very far. So I guess the battle of the chokers, who prevails, who cares at that point? And then Jags and Bills. I think if the NFL wants to be smart here, I would try to have the Bills move up and face the Steelers. You have Jags and Chargers rematch in that scenario. I do think Patriots Texans is a great matchup for the NFL as well. And I think that the Texans could potentially upset the Patriots there. But I do like how these seedings have gone. Ideally, if I had my way, I would put the Bills at the 5 seed to match up against the Steelers, Chargers and Jags, and then Patriots Texans. Broncos can have the 1 seed, I suppose, with the Patriots still there competing potentially, and maybe even the Chargers or Bills could still leapfrog above the Broncos if they keep falling.
Yeah, I don't think that necessarily fits the NFL's narrative this year because it seems like they have tried to help the Buffalo Bills and it hasn't really gone their way for them winning the East. And if they match up against the Jaguars here, it's almost like the NFL is just pushing forward new faces this year and kind of testing different storylines because let's be honest, Josh Allen has had his chance in the past and he hasn't made the most of it when he's had the opportunity to almost beat Mahomes. They had the best defense in the league. They can't stop the Chiefs with 13 seconds left. He makes some terrible plays at the end of the game last year and ends up choking. So for me, if I'm the NFL, I like the matchup with the Jaguars and the Bills in the first round. And then if we get Justin Herbert also winning, and then we get CJ Stroud versus Drake May, then we have the Chargers, who have had one of the best red zone defenses in the league, facing off against, I believe it would be the Jaguars in the second round. You kind of get that playoff rematch, and then you would get probably the Texans and the Broncos in a rematch, or you'd get the Patriots and Jaguars and Drake May versus Trevor Lawrence. So you would get at least that going forward. So I think that if you're the NFL would be the smartest matchup if you're trying to kind of go with the upset narrative and the upset storyline because I feel like the Bills still would be favored if they matched up with the Jaguars at least by 3 points.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree there. I honestly think that Texans and Broncos would be a good divisional round matchup. And then if you can have Herbert and Josh Allen head to head in the divisional round, or even Aaron Rodgers, whoever wins that game, really, both storylines are great. That would set up potentially Buffalo and Jacksonville, or Buffalo and Denver, Buffalo and the Texans. But I do think that we would be positioned for an AFC title game where Buffalo's playing against another star like Justin Herbert, or potentially a um, a Trevor Lawrence potentially, depending on how the seeding goes.
Yeah, I think if they stay at that 6 seed, though, the Jaguars would beat them. And I think that'd be fine because if the seeding remains the same, I would go probably a second round matchup of Trevor versus Justin Herbert and then probably Bo Nix versus CJ Stroud in Houston. And then the Broncos ended up knocking him out of that game, so the Texans get a little bit of chance for revenge. Their defense has been a little bit hotter. They've kind of been the better team going down the stretch here. So you have four new faces for the NFLs who can kind of take the mantle from Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes if need be. So it feels like the NFL's kind of going through a little bit of a reshaping of as far as the balance of powers right now.
Yeah, especially if you have the Bills being a first down exit after you have all four of these top four quarterbacks out of the playoffs. I think that'd be good for the NFL, especially as we see the Chiefs dynasty coming to its end. So AFC picture, I like the way the seating is now, and I do think the Colts and Ravens are now officially out. But this matches up. I like how this AFC matchup has played out.
Yeah.
And then NFC, we have right now the Seahawks as the number one seed, with the Bears, Niners, and Rams all potentially still in that mix. But if we go with just what's going on today, Seahawks have the one seed. It would be Bears and Packers in the first round of the playoffs. Potentially Jordan Love with that too. Eagles and Rams, which would be great. And then we have Panthers and Niners, which that's a game that I do think the Niners roll the Panthers. However, I think the Panthers are going to be better than the Bucks there. But how do we like these playoff matchups so far? Is there any seeding changes you may see?
Yeah, I think the seeding change we're going to see is I think the Niners are going to be the number one seed. I think the Niners are going to beat the Seattle Seahawks in Week 18 and then shock the NFL. Brock Purdy, I mean, talk about a guy who is injured a little bit. He kind of gets just dragged through the mud. Brock Purdy is just a product of Kyle Shanahan and having Debo Samuel and Christian McCaffrey, but this is a guy who ended up getting to a Super Bowl, and he looks really good. He's throwing on the run, scrambling, making big plays, and he's really getting into the flow. And this is a guy who's still young, and he's still getting better. So I think I will take Brock Purdy over Sam Darnold at this point and actually take the 49ers to upset the Seattle Seahawks and get the number one seed. So I think he's someone that people need to start talking about a little bit more as far as it comes to just taking him seriously, because this is a guy who kind of just gets scoffed at and has kind of been thrown away by the NFL media. But after that game Monday night versus the Colts, like, you dropped 40 points and it looked you dropped 48 points and it looked like you could have had a few more touchdowns too. Took your foot off the gas a little bit.
Yeah, and he's a guy that's been playing really well. I mean, he got banged up, but 17 touchdowns, 8 picks. If you take out that one game where he threw 3 interceptions against the Niners, or I'm sorry, the Panthers, at that point, he's played a pretty clean game. Over the last 3 games, he has 9 touchdowns to 1 interception. He's completing 70 plus percent of his throws in these games. QBR of 140 a few weeks ago. Like, this is a guy that he's mobile. He does have a good deep ball, I would say. And ultimately he plays a clean game for the most part. Occasionally he has some picks in there, but I like what I've seen from Brock Purdy. And I do think it'd be a good storyline for a Niners team that's been banged up so much. If they're able to go into that one seed, that's when we're talking about coach of the year. If they end up getting the one seed, that maybe we give this to Kyle Shanahan this year, potentially.
Yeah, and then that would set up Seattle and Carolina. And I think Seattle is on the clock where they would lose if they win their division in the wild card round. But could that clock reset if they lose to Seattle and then play them a second time and potentially you win the next matchup with them?
I mean, let's see. So it would be, I mean, the way that the Panthers have been, they've won every other game. They're about to lose next week, and then they beat the Pucks. The playoffs, is that reset again? I mean, I don't know. I mean, the Panthers, they are good. I mean, they have a good defensive team. Brock, it's not really sure what you're going to get out of Bryce Young any given week, but we have seen them put up points against a number of great teams. They put up points against the Rams, beat the Rams. You've seen them shut out their division foes. So I definitely think the Panthers are a good enough team that maybe can win a game, but if against the Seahawks, if Sam Darnold has a playoff meltdown like we've already seen, then Panthers are in his head a little bit after they didn't want to keep him. I can definitely see it.
Yeah, so I could honestly see Seattle and Carolina matching up in the first round, and I predicted this like 4 or 5 weeks ago that it could happen, and Sam Darnold potentially having a meltdown. I like what Dave Canales is doing, and Carolina has played really well at home, so they've been exceptional there. So I think that would be an interesting matchup, and then we would have like the Rams going up against
Eagles.
the Eagles. And I think that'd be a good matchup too because they both played each other tough, and the Eagles have gotten the better of them the past 2 times they played. But I do think that the Rams, if Devonte Adams come back, should win. But if there's no Devonte Adams, I feel like that game is also a toss up.
Absolutely. I would take the Rams to win that game just because I think the Eagles, they've been a little banged up and they don't have the same juice that they had last year. You have two back-to-back years where you have deep playoff runs. I think this is kind of wearing on them. So I do think the Rams prevail. And then Bears and Packers, I think it's safe to say the Lions are out of the playoffs now at this point, sadly, unless if they went out. So maybe it's Bears Lions or maybe it's Bears Packers, but I don't know. I really liked what I saw from the Bears this past week. I think I am starting to fully embrace them a little bit more, maybe to my fault, but I think the Bears end up beating the Packers, especially with no Micah Parsons and then a banged up Jordan Love. I think the Bears get some revenge, and I think they get their first playoff win since 2018.
Yeah, if Jordan Love is healthy, I actually do still think that the Packers would beat the Bears. Especially they do have that playoff experience there. I think as a seven seed kind of being written off, and then the Bears don't count out like a team that has really had no expectations on them going into it, and now you're the two seed, you're favored, you're supposed to be there. Jordan Love playing with house money, really no pressure on him at all. I feel like that would be a winning recipe for Green Bay. So I actually think Green Bay would upset them, and then you would have pretty much the Packers and the entire NFC West in the next round.
Which is wild, to be honest. And then we would have Packers facing, in your scenario, the Niners, and then we would have Rams and Seahawks if the Seahawks beat the Panthers in that game. So, I mean, the way the Seahawks and Rams,
Eulogy of Rams Seahawks. Like the
I
NFL
mean,
definitely wants that.
that might have been the best Thursday night game at least of this season. And we've been spoiled with great Thursday night games, but with what we've seen from them, even the game before that, where Sam Darnold had a meltdown, that game was still close. I would love to see a trilogy there. And I do think the Rams prevail there, setting up potentially either Packers Rams, which is always iconic, or we would see Rams and 49ers, which is also iconic. So either way, NFC takes the cake for best matchups.
Yeah, but I definitely think the NFC playoffs will be interesting. I still think Philadelphia, if Devonte Adams is going to be banged up and isn't there, the Rams necessarily haven't been able to overcome some of their issues in the weather. And Saquon Barkley is turning it up, it seems like, at the end of the season here. So don't necessarily count out the Philadelphia Eagles because they've been playing dead a little bit. That defense is still really big, fast, strong, and athletic. And I think they're a team that could just wake up, and I wouldn't be surprised if they take it to a different level, and everyone's like, "Oh, that's the Philadelphia Eagles team we've been watching for the past few years."
Yeah, I can definitely see it. But next week, we're going to start to see all these different playoff seeding getting clinched. Will the Lions still make that interesting as that seventh seed potentially if they win out? We shall see. But these are the current playoff pictures. It seems like it's going to be pretty much intact with these seven teams in both respective conferences, pretty much securing their place in the dance next week.
Yeah, it'll just be where the seating falls there. And then Thursday, we're going to play a fun game of will the NFL roll out three games that don't matter at all and still crush the NBA on Christmas and taking it away? I mean, the NBA used to be iconic on Christmas. We all remember the commercials where they're doing jingle bells, shooting threes. And
Mhm.
now the NBA, as it's slowly faded into semi irrelevance with getting less viewership in the NBA Finals than baseball did in the MLB this year. Um, Now we have the NFL on Netflix. They roll out three games that seemingly don't matter as we roll into previewing Week 17 after we pretty much hit every single major game last week. Only missed on the Lions and Steelers one, but
You were right about that one. Yeah,
yeah.
so Christmas, we start out with the Cowboys and Commanders, both teams eliminated from playoff contention. Dallas is favored by a touchdown. The Cowboys have struggled away from home, but the Commanders have also struggled at home in this game. And I mean, the Cowboys are playing with house money, and it's Christmas on this game. For America and for the NFL, I feel like they're going to push the Cowboys to win this game. At 7 point spread, I feel like it's a little high, but I do think the Cowboys are going to win this game.
Yeah, I'll take the Cowboys as well. I mean, just the Commanders have looked atrocious the past few weeks, so give me Dallas in this one.
Plus, I do think the Cowboys are destined to be 8-1. That's just the arc that I see. And then 4:30 game, we have Lions and Vikings. Still a little bit to fight for. The Lions got absolutely embarrassed or completely, honestly, just shunned after what we saw with the refs last game. They're going to come out pissed. They're favored at 7.5 against Max Hosmer's Vikings. I like the Lions to win this game. They've been relatively decent coming off a loss. They haven't really lost back-to-back games outside of this past week, which I think they should have won. So I think the Lions prevail.
Yeah, there's still hope for Detroit, and as long as there's still a glimmer of hope, even though they can't control their own destiny, still have to pick Detroit in this one, especially versus Minnesota. I can't see them getting swept by the Vikings this year.
And then we have the Chiefs and Broncos as the primetime game. Broncos are favored by 13 and a half points, which honestly, might take the Chiefs to cover in that spread. That's a pretty big spread. However, we're going to be rocking it with Chris Alodacon eventually, who is a seventh round pick who we haven't really seen too much from him. He has thrown 16 career passes, so I don't know what we're going to go in for, and I don't think the Broncos do either. That's why I feel like, honestly, I think the Chiefs are going to cover the spread, two scores, and then the Broncos team that is not a very efficient offense. I kind of like the Chiefs to cover, but I do think the Broncos should win this game.
Yeah, I think the Broncos still cover here because I don't think there's really a way for the Chiefs to score. Patrick Mahomes really had to use his legs to even get them in a position to score all year long. And honestly, after the Titans got the safety last week, I was convinced that game was going to end 2-0, and that was going to be the score. So overall, I just don't think that the Chiefs really have any reason at all that they can score more than 10. So unless the Broncos have a epic meltdown on offense, which is entirely possible, they should cover it.
Naturally, hopefully. And then Saturday, we have some Saturday games here. We start out with Chargers and Texans in SoFi. Chargers are favored at 2.5. Now this is a Saturday game that I can get behind. And frankly, with two teams in the mix here, the Texans are riding high. I believe they've won 7 consecutive games now at this point. And the Chargers, with that offensive line, Will Anderson, Daniil Hunter going after them, that's a tough matchup for the Chargers. I do think we're going to see Kamani Vidal and Omarion Hampton suppressed in this game, and the Chargers are kind of run by their run game as well. I think the Texans do win in this game and cover that spread.
Yeah, it seemed like the Texans were looking forward to the Chargers a little bit last week when they struggled versus the Raiders, but that was a close game. But the Texans definitely could have put up more points here. So I think that the Texans will go on to win that game. That kind of gives the Broncos the edge to win that division there. So kind of sets up Buffalo versus Pittsburgh in the first round and ensures the NFL at least has Josh Allen win one playoff game. So I definitely think the NFL will pull for the Texans as well.
Absolutely. And then 8 o'clock slate, we have the Ravens and Packers. Packers are favored at 3 points. Jordan Love should play in this game. Will Lamar Jackson play in this game? Unclear yet. The Ravens aren't officially eliminated, but they've blown multiple 10-point leads. I don't really have a lot of faith in them at this point. I do think the Packers, even without Micah Parsons, should be better enough to beat the Ravens and eliminate the Ravens from playoff contention.
Yeah, I like Malik Willis a lot when he's filled in for Jordan Love. So even if Jordan Love doesn't play in this game, I will take Malik Willis and ride with him over Snoop Huntley in this one.
And then the 1 o'clock slate. Some of these games are rough, so I'll go over these quickly. Patriots Jets. Patriots are favored at 13.5, and that sounds about right. They're 7-0 away from home, and I think they're about to go 8-0, and they should cover this game. Patriots, after a good game against the Ravens, I think they come out swinging against the lowly Jets.
Yeah, Stephon Diggs playing for an incentive. He needs 128 yards and four more catches for a $500,000 bonus. So I think him and Drake May are going to try and push for that in this game, and then hopefully rest starters versus Miami next week. But Patriots definitely set up to finish 14-3 with the Dolphins coming up.
And then we have Bengals and Cardinals. If I know anything about the Cardinals, they will score 20 points. Whereas the Bengals, with what we saw last week, I think they're just playing football. It's house money. It doesn't matter. The season's all but over. I'll take the Bengals to win that game.
Yeah, Joe Burrow, just a guy out here having fun, chill guy having fun against the Arizona Cardinals. Jacoby Brissett will do everything in his power to have the maximum amount of stats to not score 20 and eventually lose. So,
Now we talk about some teams that are kryptonites to another. Steelers and Browns. I mean, I can pull up the record, but we all know Steelers own the Browns historically. They're favored by 3 points. They can all but clinch the division with this game, and we face the lowly Browns. Maybe we see the sack record for Miles Garrett in this game, but Shador Sanders, I don't think they're able to get it done. I like the Steelers to move to 10-6 and clinch that division.
is this in Cleveland though?
This isn't Cleveland.
Honestly, with how the Browns' defense has been playing and no DK Metcalf there, that takes the big play threat away for the Steelers. I think the Browns can actually win this game. So give me Cleveland with the upset here. The Steelers haven't given me enough confidence that they're a surefire pick. They can wrap it up versus Baltimore, and I just don't think this team is going to have the killer instinct. I could be proven wrong about the Steelers in this one, but you went toe to toe with Buffalo. Should have won that game if you didn't get screwed out of a couple calls there. The safety that wasn't a safety. So give me Cleveland. I think they should have the upset versus Pittsburgh.
Over under 33.5. Should be low scoring in this game.
Yeah, give me like 16 to 12.
Yeah, I can see that. And then Red Hot Saints, who have won three straight, taking on the Titans, who have also played pretty hot. This is actually for a game that most people would kind of chalk off as a non-important game. Two teams that are building momentum into next season. The Saints with Tyler Shuck has looked great. Chris Olave has played great this year, but Cam Ward is starting to get into rhythm here. The Saints are favored at 2.5 in Nashville. I will take the Saints. I do think they are a better team with more momentum. So give me the Saints. But game that I do think with the over under of 39.5, I do think it's the over. I think this is actually going to be a great game.
Yeah, I think this will be a fun kind of one of those underrated games that gets lost in red zone here. So give me the Saints as well to win this one.
And then we have Jags and Colts. Probably not going to see Philip Rivers in this game. It's probably going to be Riley Leonard or Anthony Richardson. But Jags are favored at 6.5. They are fighting for not only their division but potentially the one seed. I will take the Jags to beat the Colts, and the Colts officially be dead.
Yeah, Jags have a pretty easy schedule to finish out the year, and they have been on a hot streak here. And you get to beat up the Colts, then you have the Titans next week. So give me the Jaguars here to win.
Then we have Bucks and Dolphins, and this game is less about this game for me and more about next week's game where they face the Panthers. I think they're going to try to position it so that the winner wins that division. I will take the Bucks to beat the Dolphins. I think this game is going to be close. It's 5.5 point spread. I do think it's going to probably be in the Dolphins that cover that. However, give me the Bucks. It is Quinn Ewers. I do think they can beat Quinn Ewers in this game. So I'll take the Bucks, leading to a winner take all week 18.
Yeah, it could be a winner take all week 18, but something tells me that Miami's just going to come out there, pull off the upset. The Buccaneers have just been inventing new ways to lose, and Quinn Ewers had a rough first week, so that kind of lowers the Tampa Bay Buccaneers guard where you still have Jalen Waddle, who's been explosive. The Miami Dolphins were a little bit hot before they ran into this two-game win streak, so I'm going to pick the Miami Dolphins to play a little bit of upset ball and some season ender for Baker Mayfield.
I'm here to see it. Now, this game is an obvious pick for me because of just the history of the Panthers. But Seahawks, we've seen them beat to the Jets, lose to the Falcons, beat to the Bills, lose to the Bills, all these games. They win, they lose, they win, they lose. They won last week, and I was right when I picked them. They faced the Seahawks. I think they lose to the Seahawks in this game.
Yeah, and if they lose to the Seahawks, my pick of Miami would still hold up, and it'll still be a winner take all game. And I think they lose to Seattle as well because Seattle is playing for bigger and brighter things. You can't go out there on Thursday Night Football, beat the Rams, take the one seed, and then lose to the Panthers. That can't happen.
Surely, not at all. Then we go to the 4 o'clock slates, which there are only in this game, there's only two 4 o'clock slate games to,
Better be
or
good.
yeah, yeah. Well, one of them is the battle of the one number one overall pick, Giants and Raiders. And with the Raiders and the Giants, I mean, they have Ashton Genty, they have Brock Bowers, and the Raiders are not good at losing at all in this case. And I do think that this is a scenario where the Raiders do pull out the win. It's in Vegas. They're starting to gain momentum. Geno Smith, we'll see what he ends up doing, but not a great game overall, but should be entertaining nonetheless. I take the Raiders to beat them and moves out on the number one overall pick.
Yeah, this is a Lovey Smith ass game if I've ever seen it, where they end up beating them and then losing out on the number one overall pick. Instead of falling into CJ Stroud, you'll probably make another terrible mistake here. But hopefully, you learn from your mistake hiring Pete Carroll, move on, hire someone like Clint Kubiak here. But we'll see.
And then a good 4 o'clock slate, we have Eagles and Bills. Bills wasn't overly impressed with what I saw from them against the Browns. And we are in Orchard Park, one of the last Orchard Park games we will ever see, unfortunately. Eagles, they've all but clinched their division at this point. I think they are starting to gain momentum. I like what I saw the last 2 weeks. Give me the Eagles to beat the Bills in this game.
Yeah, I like the Eagles in this one as well. Bills have one of the worst run defenses in the league. Saquon Barkley starting to heat up a little bit, and then seems like the Philadelphia Eagles have started to turn up the dial, and then you can see Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis definitely waking up for this matchup with Josh Allen here. So I actually am feeling the Eagles as well here, and then that will kind of disrupt the AFC because if Buffalo loses this one, they could potentially fall into the seventh seed, which would maybe give us a matchup of Buffalo in Denver or New England, depending on how that shakes out with the Chargers here. So I think that could be interesting for the NFL, or if things stayed the way they are, it would give us Bills Patriots 3 in the first round.
Which I'm here for that arc. And then the Sunday night game is the Niners and Bears. Both of these teams fighting for the number one overall seed. The Niners, with what we saw with Brock Purdy in this game, um, I think in this case, I'm picking with a team that I trust the coach more and a team that I trust the team to make fewer mistakes. And I feel like you probably agree here. I will take the Niners. They are 3 point favorites in Santa Clara. They're 4-2 at home. Um, the Bears did impress me with their win against the Packers, but it took them until the end of the fourth quarter to rally. Probably should have lost that game. I'll take the Niners, who I trust more. I trust Christian McCaffrey and I trust Brock Purdy more. Give me the Niners in this one.
Yeah, Niners definitely have that pedigree in this one. And I saw this matchup and immediately thought the Niners were going to win. And the Bears, you just had a struggle session versus the Packers without Jordan Love, and you were able to come back. But the 49ers defense under Robert Saleh is quietly one of the hottest defenses in the league right now. So I think they'll be able to turn over the Chicago Bears. I don't think this is going to be a overly high scoring game. But I do think the Niners are going to win, and the winner of this game is potentially going to walk away with the number one seed, where the San Francisco 49ers are potentially going to go into the playoffs with two playoff like games where you're battling the Bears for the one seed. Bears are still battling for their division with the Green Bay Packers, and then you also have a game versus Seattle where if you beat Chicago and you win versus Seattle, you're the number one seed. Get a bye after essentially playing two pre-playoff games.
Yeah, so they're essentially going to start their playoffs early with where the Niners are. And then the Rams, not so much. They are a Monday Night Football. They face the Falcons with Kirk Cousins on primetime. Rams are favored at 7.5 at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. And with that Rams team also in that mix for that playoff position, Falcons are all but out. I do think the Rams do get it done and take the win after falling heartbreakingly to the Seahawks. You can tell Sean McVay was just pissed after that game. So I like the Rams to bounce back, especially with Sean McVay following a loss. So give me the Rams in this one.
Yeah, I think the Rams get it done. I do think the Falcons cover in this game is going to be a little bit too close for comfort for Rams fans, especially Kirk Cousins has kind of been reinventing his primetime career with the Atlanta Falcons. Kyle Pitts is suddenly a factor these past few weeks here, Bijan Robinson. So I don't necessarily think the Rams are a lock to win this game. And My gut, I never typically should pick up against it. It is telling me that the Falcons might edge out the Rams in this one. The flukier things have happened on Monday Night Football.
I think that 7.5 point spread is really sexy because I do think the Rams can win this game by a touchdown. So if I'm a gambling man, which I'm not saying I am, but if I was 7.5, I like the Falcons to potentially cover.
Yeah, and that is a crazy slate of games for Week 17. I mean, probably the most impactful game in the AFC. We're going to have the Chargers and the Texans and the Bills and the Eagles. That will pretty much shape the 5 through the 7 seed there. And then if the Chargers win, they'll be in a battle for Denver in the last week of the season to be the potentially number one overall seed, or at least the winner of that division. Chargers could still be the 2 seed there, and then the NFC, the number one seed, could get decided with the San Francisco 49ers and Chicago Bears playing on Sunday Night Football. And then we're probably either going to have the Chargers and Broncos or 49ers and Seattle Seahawks flexed into Sunday Night Football. So,
I'm
some
excited to
great
see it.
options for the NFL.
The witching hour of the NFL season is upon us. So we have now covered week 16 and 17, one final week following this upcoming week, and we will be in Super Wildcard weekend. We're here. The best part of the NFL season is upon us.
Best part of the NFL season is upon us, so I am excited for that. While you've been waiting for that to start, waiting for some of the games, what have you been watching over the past week?
Yes. So I wanted to, I got Paramount Plus and I was watching The Godfather. I decided to move away from the mafia movies and just watch like a classic action movie. So I decided to watch the first Rambo movie. Technically, it's titled First Blood. And let me tell you, of the action films that I've watched, like the Die Hards of the world, like the Aliens of the world, the first Rambo, not so much the future Rambos, but the first one might be my favorite action movie that I've seen in a while. It's a pissed off war vet that is just trying to find a place to stay, and this small town police officers, or really police corp, are just being assholes to him. They're just bullying him, they're just beating him up for no reason. They keep dropping him out of the town to basically tell him to take a hike. Eventually they arrest him for basically nothing charges. They beat him up in jail, and then officially he just snaps and just goes absolutely berserk. He has a cop chase. He ends up going into the woods and setting up these different guerrilla warfare traps, and just slowly, one by one, kills off an entire police force over the course of the movie. It's a movie that's a moderately absurd movie, but you have vintage Sylvester Stallone. You have a kind of an anti-war message underneath all of it, and you have classic, just action 80s movie without it being all guns ablazing. A lot of his kills are via like knives that he creates in the woods. But if you like action movies, I think that this is one of the best action movies of all time. Truly.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. When I watched it, I thought this movie was definitely funny. It kind of gives you that charm and charisma that's missing from a lot of modern action movies where it actually feels like it has a pulse, it has a soul to it, especially with Sylvester Stallone. And Stallone is one of those just like action stars where he doesn't have the most range necessarily of an actor, but he can definitely portray different characters in a way where some modern action stars like The Rock or John Cena definitely can't. Where
Hmm.
he's Rocky, um, and then he's Rambo in this movie, and he's done some other incredible action
Expendables.
movies. Yeah, The Expendables 2, where that movie's kind of just playing himself, to be honest. But this
Yeah.
one's definitely funny, and it kind of this is like what they used to do with homeless people, though, where if there's like a homeless person in town, the police would just pick them up, drop them off, and they still do that. Where if you're in like rural Maine and there's like a homeless person, they'll pick them up, they'll drop them off in Manchester, they'll drop them off in Portland, Maine, they'll drop them off in Boston. Same thing if you're in like rural Washington or Oregon, they drop them off in Portland, drop them off in Seattle where there's a city because they say it's like, oh, well, they have like, at least they have a homeless shelter there, but all the homeless shelters are full there. So it's kind of just like a problem where it's like they used to do that and they're still doing that today.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think, I know in Phoenix, they'll move people from Scottsdale over to Tempe or Phoenix to basically just get them out of the nice town. But what I really liked about this movie is like it's fresh off of, I think it came out in 73, or maybe like late 70s. But you can definitely hear like the post-Vietnam um anti Vietnam message in it, which I kind of like. Because I feel like most action movies, my biggest criticism is it's just all, guns, explosions, and there's not really a lot of like identity to the movie. Where in this movie, you're not really rooting against Rambo, even if he is killing people and he's killing cops in this scenario. Like, you don't really at any point root for the cops to catch him. You're rooting for them to have a bloody, murderous death. And that's what you get. You kind of get what you want in this movie. And also, like, the movie doesn't really end with him serving justice. It kind of just ends after he's been detained, and that's it. We don't really know what happens to Rambo. If you carry on, there's a whole bunch of plots that they carry on and milk the franchise later on. But for just this movie, it's really just a guy that is just trying to find a place to stay, and then the cops are assholes, and they get justice against them. So I think for an action star with a movie with an actual identity, this has to be one of the best action movies of all time.
Yeah, it's like a good allegory too, because he's like a Vietnam veteran, right? And then he's
Yeah,
just trying to go to town, chill out, and then the cops are treating him like trash. So it's like kind of an allegory too. It's like how some of the veterans are treated. Like you go fight this war, makes a bunch of corporations a ton of money, you come back, and then you just get shit all over when you come home. So it's like a lot
yeah,
of like the points in it and a lot of like the things like this is a movie that came out over 50 years ago are still relevant today, like with some of the undertones to it.
yeah, absolutely. But I really liked it, and I'll probably watch the other Rambos, but I think this one's probably going to be the best one that I see from what I've seen. But I know it's the holidays. I know you're flying out, I think, tomorrow, but anything you've been watching?
Yeah, I've been watching a lot of Christmas movies recently. Just rewatched Violent Night. That was good, but the one that was like the most bizarre that I rewatched was the Santa Claus 2.
Oh my God.
And the Santa Claus 2, like the first one is like cool. It's like a normal like movie where he like scares Santa off the roof, which is kind of actually it's not really morbid. It's just like the older you get, the more bizarre these movies are. Where he scares him off the roof, he kills Santa, puts the coat on, and then the second one they introduce essentially the occult, where you have the Easter Bunny, Father Time, like the Tooth Fairy, all of these different like entities that you're taught about when you're a kid, and then this movie he has to go and essentially force someone to be his wife and get them like if you don't marry me I won't be able to be Santa Claus, and you have the Mrs. Claus, like essentially if he isn't like I think he would get banished if he doesn't find a Mrs. Claus. And while he's doing that, they clone him and then they create a different version of Santa Claus where he's like a life-sized action figure of Santa, and he just goes off the rail and becomes a dictator and like starts like ordering the elves around. He creates like an entire like fascist like North Pole. He's like you see him like drinking hot chocolate for the first time, and then the other side of it is Tim Allen just trying to guilt someone into being Mrs. Claus or he won't be Santa anymore. And then he has to get married within like a day essentially. I'm like these movies are just so bizarre, and I just rewatched the third one as well with Jack Frost. He's trying to like become Santa, and then he tricks Tim Allen into saying he wishes he was never Santa, and then you see like the alternate universe of Jack Frost was Santa, and he ends up turning the North Pole into a theme park, and I'm just like. Those are like one of those movies you think are like fun, cool when you're a kid, and then you watch them and you're like, these are very strange movies.
They're like the epitome of like 2000s, like not only just 2000 Christmas movies, but 2000s movies in general. Just absurdity, kind of has like a slight Country Bears vibe to them, where they're just a little bit cursed there too. And I've seen Santa Claus too, if I'm not mistaken, he has to like essentially kill or at least defeat the clone Santa at the end of
Yeah.
it. And so it's just like absurd. The first one was like kind of like a tongue-in-cheek like family movie, but this one and then pretty much the remaining Santa Claus movies just became more and more absurd the further along in the franchise you become. Because they're like, oh wait, this made some money, let's make some more of these. And then it ends up just being taking down his clone or basically forcing a woman to be Mrs. Claus. And then the Frost series ends up becoming even more absurd, who I believe Martin Short is the Jack Frost character, if I'm not mistaken. But
Yeah, Martin Short is Jack Frost, and then her like she's having the baby in the third one, so she like wants family around because it might come while he's delivering presents, and then he like brings her parents to the North Pole and tries to convince them that it's Canada.
oh god, yeah.
Like,
I mean, they're great. I mean, they're great Christmas movies, but they're great for all the wrong reasons. They're great because it's corny and absurd. Which I feel like for holiday movies, I kind of prefer those. That's why I think Home Alone's great because it's just absurd the way he basically murders the robbers. And I feel like with the Santa Claus movies, it's not quite that same level of absurdity, but it's the same kind of tongue-in-cheek, fun holiday type movie.
you know, the best part about Home Alone is when you realize he could have called the cops the entire time, but he decided to torture them instead.
Which honestly, I mean, it made for great content. But I think, yeah, for holiday movies, I do think I'd prefer that over like the It's About Beautiful Life or like the cheesy, corny Christmas movies, the Grinches of the world. Like, I prefer a movie that just kind of makes me laugh based on just the ridiculousness of it.
Yeah, yeah. Watching like the Santa Claus and then I watched Elf. That was good. Rewatching it and then Violent Night still holds up. Where it's like just the right amount of corniness, and then you have a lot of just satisfying violence in that movie. Where you kind of have like, if you kind of get that satisfaction if Home Alone went for it and was rated R with when the
Mhm.
girls in the attic, and then you have the guy like slip, and then the nail goes right through it. Like that gets me every time.
Yeah, no, Violent Night's great, and I do think I feel like because of how recently it came out, people haven't fully considered it a Christmas classic, but I would put it as I think it's kind of one of those instant classic Christmas movies.
Yeah, getting a sequel next year too, coming out next December 4th. They started filming in Winnipeg, I believe, in September. So definitely looking forward to that sequel. But definitely let us know your favorite Christmas movies. What Christmas movies are overrated? Do you like the Jim Carrey Grinch? Is It's a Wonderful Life overrated? Definitely let us know. What's your favorite version of A Christmas Carol? And then also, what games are you looking forward to next week? Let us know.
Let us know, but most importantly, stay brick.